Today, there's once again a human tragedy underway because of huge and apparently unpredictable increases in interest rates that will force Canadians to sell their homes or to default upon their payments. The Prime Minister promised that interest rates would remain low for a long time, but the government's expenditures have forced inflation up, and therefore the Bank of Canada had to increase interest rates. What increase will the average family see in its mortgage payments in the next 3 years? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Over the past few months, I've spoken to many Canadians who shared their concerns with me with regard to the cost of living and their worries about global inflation or their worries about the economic situation in which we are today. Of course, the Bank of Canada continues to do its work, but we will also continue to do our work with a number of non-inflationary measures that will help Canadian families, help for dental care for kids, working for low-income workers, investments for groceries. The Leader of the Official Opposition, the Governor of the Bank of Canada, indicated that this government's deficits are increasing inflation. The former Minister for Finance, the former Liberal Minister, stated that this Prime Minister's inflationary policies is putting the foot on the accelerator. It's hitting the gas for inflation, whilst the Bank of Canada is trying to hit the brakes. Mr. Speaker, we have the highest household debt level in G7 countries. Canadians can no longer pay for these deficits. Will he say at least what increase will be seen in mortgage payments in the next 3 years? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we know that Canadians are facing difficult times, and that is exactly the reason for which this government is here to invest to help them in a targeted and non-inflationary way. The Conservative Party insists that we should send less assistance for low-income earners, less help for dental care for those who need it, less help for families with young children in daycare. We will continue to be here to help Canadians weather these difficult storms, because that is our job. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Sucker punch. That's what Canadians received from this Prime Minister. He promised them low interest rates for long. He said debt was without consequence and that the budget would balance itself. None of those things came true, and interest rates are now 19 times higher than they were a year ago. The Governor of the Bank of Canada, the former Liberal Finance Minister, countless other experts agree that the Prime Minister's deficits are ballooning inflation and therefore interest rates. Families have to plan their finances. So will he indicate how much will the average family see their monthly mortgage payments go up over the next 3 years? How much?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, while the Bank of Canada continues to do its job to drive down inflation, which is going down, we will continue to do our job to be there to support Canadians who need it, with investments in things like dental care, in a grocery rebate, in supports for low-income renters, and the kinds of things that Conservatives would be cutting instead. Canadians are hurting, and the Conservatives' answer is cuts to programs, cuts to supports for families, cuts to Canadians at a time they need it. Austerity is not the answer, Mr. Speaker. Responsible fiscal approach is. That's exactly what we're doing by supporting Canadians who need it.
Hear, hear. Leader of the Opposition.
Actually, austerity is exactly what Canadians are feeling in their household budgets today, while the government budgets overflow with abundance. Mr. Speaker, there's already been a 16% year-over-year increase in the number of Canadians missing their mortgage payments. After 8 years of this Prime Minister, we have the highest household debt in the entire G7. Household debt is now 7% higher than our entire GDP, Mr. Speaker. And now his inflationary deficits are shooting up interest rates. So how much will the average family have to plan to pay more in mortgage payments per month?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
straight, Mr. Speaker. Canada has the best debt-to-GDP ratio in the G7. We have the lowest deficit in the G7, but the Leader of the Opposition wants us to do far less to support Canadians who need it right now. That's exactly backwards, Mr. Speaker. Here, his pursuit of ideological gains is hurting Canadians. We are going to continue to be there in responsible, targeted ways, keeping our fiscal responsibility at the center of what we do while we support Canadians in targeted, non-inflationary ways. That's what Canadians need right now.
Hear, hear. Well, Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, it's not just me anymore pointing out that deficits drive inflation. It's Liberals. It's the former Liberal Finance Minister, John Manley, who said that the Liberal deficits are a bit like driving your car with one foot on the gas and the other on the brake, generally, especially if there's slushy conditions under your tires, end quote. He's pointing out that this Prime Minister presses his foot on the inflationary gas pedal while the Bank of Canada has to press on the brakes. The engine is eventually going to blow. We know Canadians cannot pay their bills. Will the Prime Minister be honest today and tell Canadians how much their mortgage payments will go up because of these rate hikes?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Let's use a specific example of what the Leader of the Opposition calls inflationary spending. We made a decision that kids under 12 in this country shouldn't have to pay for dental care. Their families should be able to send them to the dentists. Well, Mr. Speaker, the Conservative politicians who all have access to dental care through the House of Commons supports for their kids don't think Canadians who can't afford to send their kids to the dentist should be doing that, and they say that's inflationary. Mr. Speaker, that approach around cuts and austerity is not what Canadians need.
Hear, hear.